Business leaders know the future is already here. The economy is shifting. Non-humans are entering the workforce. Nothing feels certain. SHRM understands those evolving challenges, both in the workplace and the wider world. In this podcast, we'll bring together authors, researchers, executives, and non-traditional experts to help you take on the challenges others haven't yet considered. Because you don't need to be a futurist, you need actionable insights now. You need to be a tomorrowist. I'm Jerry Wan. Welcome to Tomorrowist, where we explore the trends shaping the future of work. Economic uncertainty is on every leader's radar. With mixed signals in the labor market, demographic shifts, and technological disruption, the challenge is clear. How can leaders spot recession risks early and build workforces that thrive in any climate? Joining us to share his expertise in labor markets and economic forecasting is Gad Levanon, Chief Economist at the Burning Glass Institute. Gad, welcome to Tomorrowist.
Thank you, Jerry. Thanks for having me.
You know, we're talking here in the fourth quarter of 2025, and certainly we're going to talk about some current issues and certain current conditions. But, economies go up, they go down. There's recessions and there's booms and there's twists and turns. And so we hope that this conversation, whenever you listen to it, will help anybody and everybody become a great leader. And so we want to make sure that we frame that at the top of, our conversation. We want to make sure that this isn't just relevant to the current climate. And so let's talk broadly just to get started. You've been, the chief economist for a number of great organizations and have studied, both the ups and the downs of many a cycle. Why is it so challenging to predict the direction of an economy, not just right now, but in any given scenario?
The economy, especially the macroeconomy, has so many factors that are influencing it. And every period is different than the previous periods. So it's just a very complicated science to predict. I think in the current environment, we have several large factors that are making it even more complicated than usual, especially since there seems to be a very unusual divergence. On the one hand, there is almost no job growth in recent months. On the other hand, other measures of economic activity like GDP seems to be doing very well. So this is confusing many people and makes it harder.
As you mentioned, there are mixed signals, let's call it. There are some positive indicators. There are some not so positive indicators. Is there a general rule of thumb that leaders can rely on to make sure that they are relying on information and ignoring some other ones that to help them better predict what the future holds?
There are various ones, but in this case, I think it's a very unique situation. So relying on perfect previous performance of some indicators to educate us about the current situation is not very accurate. I think what's is a bit unusual is that we have a very strong productivity growth right now. So companies are able to do more with less. Part of it is because the reaction to the huge labor shortage that we had in 21, 22, 23. Companies had to learn how to do more with less. But also technology seems to be having an impact. So when you have a strong productivity growth, you could have a situation where demand for goods and services continues to grow, production continues to grow, but you don't need more people to do that, and therefore job growth is very weak. And this is a very unusual situation, but I think it's the situation where we are at right now.
What hidden complexities do leaders need to understand when interpreting these economic forecasts, and then help us understand in broad terms, what specific things that folks need to be paying attention to?
I think a very important thing to pay attention to is consumer spending, because eventually that's 70% of the economy. And you can't have a recession without consumer spending going down. And it is not going down right now. And But it is an unusual period because a lot of the consumer spending is being done by wealthier households. A lot of the gains that we are seeing now in the economy um, is coming from the tech sector, and a lot of the wealth that's being created is there and by people who own shares in tech companies. So that tends to be the higher percentiles in the income distribution. So they are continue to consume, experience consumption growth. The rest of the population less so. So that's also something that's unusual about this period.
As our audience, who's always well informed and smart about data, understands, data can be used to tell any given story, and particularly when we're dealing with a large mass of people, like a whole entire country. As you mentioned, GDP and consumer spending, disaggregate or aggregated as a headliner, can tell one story. But what you're sharing with us is that it's important for us to look at disaggregated trends to make sure that, what are the masses of people? There, or one thing I think we can safely talk about is that the impact of tariffs will have, or the impact that tariffs will have on consumer spending, particularly as we near the holidays. Tariffs have been something that were on and off, and the numbers were shifting, and businesses were reacting on how they were going to deal with it. And now, as a few months have passed, consumers have already started to feel the impact of those. And so what you're sharing is that, obviously, when we talk about consumer spending for the wealthier percentile of the population, they're not spending on, or they're already spending above and beyond their survival necessities, right? And so these are expenditures on nice to haves and want, and not needs. And so are there specific indicators on these reports that come out that you look at to go deeper, and some of our audience members can start to look at to tell a better story for particularly companies that are in the B2C, or that rely on mass consumer spending?
So there aren't regular statistics. Well, first of all, we are in a period, for people who watch this a year from now, we are in a period where, because of the government shutdown, there are no statistics anymore.
Hopefully it's over by the time this even airs.
Yeah, I hope so. Mm, But unfortunately, there are no good regular statistics of consumption by, uh, you know, by the income distribution, by income groups. But there are periodical, Moody's, for example, they calculate their own measures of that. And they certainly find that consumption growth is higher in richer households, wealthier households. So that is one thing to look at. There's also breakdown by type of consumption that I think people should look at. I should say that also when another unusual part in this economy is the buildup for the AI world. So there is huge investment, as we hear often, huge investment in data centers, power, cooling, all kinds of infrastructure that will be needed when we use even more AI than we currently use, and that contributes a big chunk of the growth in economic activity right now, Um, and to a large degree offsets the impact of the tariffs that you mentioned. I should say about that you probably remember in April there were a lot of people who said that the impact of tariffs is going to be dramatic, will put the U.S. economy into a recession, and lead to a huge spike in prices. I should say that this, to a large degree, didn't happen yet. There is an impact for sure, and we are seeing it in some prices, but the overall impact on the U.S. economy was much smaller than anticipated by many.
From your perspective, Gad, when you look at these macro trends, so I'll share an example that's very specific that just ended. So at the end of September, the federal and the federal EV credit ended, right, for automobiles, which temporarily, artificially lower the cost of acquisition or lease prices for people who wanted to buy electric vehicles. That therefore created sort of a spike in the demand for it, and companies and dealerships were saying, "Hey, come get this before this ends." That creates an artificial spike. And so if you look at the numbers without that knowledge, without that understanding, you might say, "Hey, fantastic sales in September. What happened in October?" Right? Or they might say, "Hey, this is just going to continue on and on." Um, and that's a one specific example. Um, how do leaders pay attention to some of the nuances that might be, put in an asterisk, or putting a necessary context into understanding data that might tell a completely different story without it, as it pertains to predicting what a recession might look like?
Yeah. Well, luckily, there are always things like that that make the data more difficult to understand. And that's why we have economists in the world to help us interpret that. So there are a lot of organizations that put out regular pieces on economic forecasts and understanding where we are now and where we are headed to. And I think just finding a good one and getting a sense, because a lot of economists will simply say, yeah, this was a 1 month spike. It's not reflective of the underlying trend. But I think it's too much to ask every business leader to understand and follow all of this. And as I said, that's why there are economists in the world.
um, let's talk about a few other trends that we've seen in 2025 that um, have impacted a lot of different things. And so tourism seems to be down across the board. The demographic shifts in immigration into the country. We look at numbers in terms of applicants into places of higher education for both undergraduate and graduates from international students are being impacted. There was a recent decision on H-1B visas, which are the American visas that allow foreigners to work here legally temporarily. That might have an impact, which then impacts the labor pool, impacts compensation, impacts everything downstream when it comes to what a business leader should or could be thinking about here. Um, how does that impact the outlook on the economic forecast for the rest of this year and beyond?
So I think actually that the immigration changes that we've seen are even more powerful than the tariffs in terms of their impact on the economy. And because the overall population growth is much weaker than it was during 2024, 2023. Then we had a massive increase in immigration, mostly the undocumented. And now the borders are completely shut. There is a lot of deportation. There is a lot of voluntary deportation. People are afraid, undocumented are afraid to go to work because they could get deported. So that has an impact both on kind of the demand for workers or the demand for goods and services. It's growing more slowly as a result, but an even bigger impact on the supply. So especially in locations and occupations, roles where there is a high share of undocumented workers, we are seeing a big squeeze in the labor market. Obviously, states that are near the border, like California, Texas, also Florida, um, but a lot of places where there are undocumented workers, and in jobs like construction, some transportation, agriculture, cleaning and maintenance. Uh, that's where we are seeing a big squeeze in terms of labor supply, and where many businesses are struggling.
In broad and general terms, economies sort of follow a up and down trend. There's upswings and downswings. Given some of the factors that are contributing to many of the things that we talked about, whether it's the tariffs or immigration, Do you forecast or do you foresee those trends coming back in an upswing to ease the squeeze of the labor markets and to increase labor pool so that it follows that general trend? Or do you think what we're looking at now are sort of unique factors that change and then have a more lasting impact?
Well, I think that in terms of immigration, I think in the current administration, we are going to see this more of the same for the next 3, 4 years. But even beyond that, I suspect that politically, the public opinion has changed. I think nobody will try to have like very open borders like we had in 22, 23. It, it hurts you politically. So even if the Democrats go back to power, I don't think that they would return to that. They will definitely do less in terms of deportation and things like that. But I do believe that immigration into the U.S. is going to be smaller. The tariffs, I also think in the near future, they are likely to remain as they are, maybe come down a little. But I think I don't expect major changes in that. We'll have to see what the long-term impacts, what does it do to prices, how much importers and producers swallow the price increase and how much they pass it into to the consumer. We'll also see if it really brings more manufacturing to the US or increasing manufacturing production. I don't think there is a chance that there will be major waves of new jobs in manufacturing because then there will be more automation in manufacturing. So I don't think it would lead to major job revival, but it could lead to a lot of more production, especially in tech, in pharmaceuticals, that I think there could be some movement into US.
You mentioned automation and the impact of both automation, AI, and we use those words interchangeably now. That's forever changed the way that we look, not just at life and our use cases in our personal lives, but for the business world. Earlier we talked about, you mentioned there are some, strong economic indicators and investments in data centers and all the different things that are related to that, construction, all the things. And how is that, what is the impact of that economically? So from two different factors, one from an investment perspective, and then two, from that productivity perspective, if companies can be more productive with less by relying on automation and technology, but yet fewer people are being employed or fewer net job growth exists because they don't have to hire as many. What are the traditional indicators that used to include that baseline assumption of labor inclusion? If that starts to dissipate a little bit, how does that change the way that economists like you look at the health of the economy going forward?
Right. So there is the first element that you talked about, the build-up towards a more AI world. There is no uncertainty there. It's happening big time. We already see investment on the ground and planned investment, and that's already a big boost to economic activity. And it's not just the physical investment. It's also, for example, the consulting investment. So now, in recent years, the demand for consulting changed dramatically. Now everyone wants an AI transformation in the organization, and you need consultants to be able to do that. So there is that's also kind of like the build up towards a new AI world. The second part on how much more it will make us more productive, I think there is still a big debate. I'm on the camp that is things that AI will be able to have a big impact there. I think already in things related to code and text, we are already seeing a big impact when it comes to things like interpreting data from data analysis. That's, I think, AI is not fully delivering yet, or people are not fully embracing it or implementing it. So that I think we are seeing less of that. But I think it's just a matter of time, and I think eventually, unfortunately, in some ways, there will be a lot of jobs that will be eliminated and automated.
So here on the Tomorrows, we talk about the trends shaping the future of work, and we talk about AI, we talk about economic forecasting, we talk about a lot of different things. And one goal that we have is to try to prepare our audience, whether they in their own individual capacity or as leaders of their people, to help themselves and help their teams build up the skills, the tools, the resilience, and the mindset to future-proof themselves and to make sure that they can stay relevant and growing, regardless of what the future holds. We talked about a lot today, right? We talked about the impact of tariffs and immigration, some great indicators, some not so great indicators. We just talked about AI, and that's the big elephant in the room that we talk about every day.
Yeah.
What roles, skills, and what do folks need to be doing to build up their either actual skills in their jobs that they have or learn new ones to make sure that they can stay future ready in any economy?
So that's a great question, because most of the discussion is about the negative side, and in terms of jobs, the jobs which occupations will be eliminated or significantly automated. But there will be a lot of new jobs that will be created because of AI. Uh, so just for example, we talked about the AI, the build-up towards the AI world. There are a lot of jobs involved in that, and not just kind of professional jobs, but a lot of trade and construction um, uh, and jobs like that. Then there will be a lot of new goods and services that will come out as a result. We are now seeing mostly services, but I think there is also a revolution in robotics, and we will see many more goods around the house, toys, meal preparation, um, all kinds of things that are more goods than services that will come out, and there will be a lot of jobs um, in creating those goods and services. Then there are even many jobs that, as we talked before, how to integrate AI in companies. That will create a lot of jobs by itself. And then just understanding AI. So now we have entire professions that are devoted to understanding the human brain. I think there will be a new profession in understanding LLMs, how they operate, why they give us the output that they give us, and how can we change. It's easier to change a LLM than it is to change the human brain. So how can we make them safer? How can we make them more ethical? Like that's, I think, a whole world that we are just entering, and eventually it will be a huge profession. So there are a lot of new opportunities. I think it's very important, and I would say, I'm being asked by very often by new. I have several two daughters who are in college, and um, so the topic of what young people, how should AI impact their career decisions, is top of mind for many, and I think like it's important to provide them with the information about not just the jobs that will be killed, but also about the new jobs that will come to life.
What advice do you give to not just your own daughters, but to folks that are coming into this economy for the first time, right? Because I think most of our audience are mid-career professionals, senior leaders. And so we are responding to the changes, similar to how social media, the internet, and the creator economy are just so native to the young folks coming up into this economy. So is AI, and so is just the state of the way that things are. What advice do you give to our young leaders coming up into the industry and in the economy to help navigate and again make themselves even more future proof? Because one thing is certain, that the speed of change will continue to accelerate. Not only what will change, but how quickly things will change will get even faster.
I do agree it will get even faster. I think, there are a lot of criticism of forecasts, especially like long-term forecasts. Who knows? We can't forecast the next quarter. How can we forecast 10 years ahead? But I think the core of my advice would be to follow those forecasts and try to predict which jobs don't have a good future and which jobs do, and not choose the jobs that are really likely to disappear, and choose the ones that are likely to grow. Easier said than done, but that is the core of my advice. Yeah.
I agree. One job category that was very popular, very in demand, and very highly recommended over the last couple of decades was computer programming, right? All the various types of computer science engineers, and that seems to be being impacted pretty heavily, ironically enough, by AI. You mentioned consultants earlier. Having been one myself in a former life, many consultants are consulting their way out of their own jobs, right? Because now uh, they're building their own LLMs, they're building their own systems to advise people and organizations, um, and then even implementation wise, right? And so we'll see what the world holds. As we wrap up here, two final questions. When it comes to economic data, we talked a lot today about having that critical lens, having that healthy skepticism to not trust everything, to ask deeper questions, to ask for disaggregated versions of the same data set. Um, what are some of those, um, go-to healthy skepticism nuggets, or magnifying glasses, or tools that our leaders can always have in their back pocket, so that when a data set is presented, either very positively or overly negatively, that they don't fall into groupthink and they don't fall into, taking any report for what it's worth?
So my number one advice here is, of course, to follow me on LinkedIn, and then you'll get like an unbiased opinion about everything. But seriously, I think we are in a forecasting crisis, and because we are in a period where I'll say it openly. Most economists and analysts are don't like the current administration. Let's put it this way. And I'm not going to get to whether they should or not, but I think it's very clear that in the past year, forecasts have been negatively biased because of that. And so my number one advice after following me on LinkedIn is to expect this, and understand that the reality is probably a little better than what current forecasts are. There is a gloom and doom. There is enough bad going on in the economy, don't get me wrong, but I think forecasting in the past 6-8 months have been consistently more negative than reality. And I'm not sure that this is likely to change.
My final question is always, what is the one thing that our leaders can do to help better themselves to prepare for the work of tomorrow? And I think you've answered that already, which is to find you and subscribe to your newsletter on LinkedIn, and then to build the tools to help better dissect the data, and then to help become a more discerning eye when it comes to economic forecasting data. Gad Levanon, thank you so much for your time. This was super insightful for me. I learned a lot, and we hope that regardless of when you listen to this conversation, that you'll be able to take away some nuggets and to be able to better prepare. Gad, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jerry.
That'll do it for this week's episode. If this conversation resonated with you, take a look at the show notes for additional resources on future-proofing your workforce in uncertain times. See you next time on Tomorrow List. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe to Tomorrow List wherever you get your podcasts. We also publish a weekly newsletter with in-depth articles and the latest SHRM research to help keep you in the know about the trends shaping the future of work. You can subscribe and find all of our episodes on our website at shrm.org/tomorrowist. Thanks for listening. And remember, the workplace is changing rapidly. You don't have to be a futurist, be a tomorrowist.
SHRM.